Mom should move out the baby and I need peace and quiet. She's too much. I heard my daughter-in-law's voice drifting in from the living room while I was spreading butter on a slice of bread. The knife froze mid-air. My son just nodded, gently soothing his wife. Moments later he came up to me and held out a stack of senior apartment brochures with my name written clearly on top. I glanced around what used to be my kitchen. New curtains, white dishes, the family photos gone. I smiled, set the coffee spoon down softly, and nodded. "I'll think about it, sweetie." But that same night, I opened the safe, pulled out the house documents with only my name on them, and started building a trap they'd walk into without even knowing. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Nora Whitfield, 68, widowed 8 years, living in a 2-story wood house on the shore of Lakewood in Michigan. My husband Edris and I spent nearly 40 years building this place with our own hands. Every brick, every plank, every frame on the wall carries a lifetime. And yet now, the house barely holds my breath anymore. Since Aubrey, my daughter-in-law, moved in, everything began to change in a quiet, chilly way. It started with soft words. "Mom, let me swap these curtains to make it brighter." I agreed, not suspecting a thing. Then my blue ceramic dishes I'd used for 30 years disappeared, replaced by glossy white ones to keep things consistent. The family photos, including my wedding picture and Edris's portrait, gradually vanished from the walls. Aubrey's reason always sounded so reasonable. "Just storing them for now so they won't get dusty, Mom." But all those for nows added up to a cold, empty space in the very home I built. My son, Caleb, 34, is kind and hates conflict. He's never liked seeing anyone argue. Maybe that's why, when his wife said she wanted quiet space for the baby, he only nodded. "Mom, Aubrey's pregnant, the doctor says stress isn't good for the baby. Maybe you could look for somewhere more comfortable near the retirement home by the lake, even." His voice was as light as suggesting a different dinner, but every word cut through me like a knife. I looked straight into his eyes, so much like his father's, and just smiled. "I understand, Caleb. I'm not one to explode. I spent my life as an ER nurse where shouting and blood are everyday things. I know that flaring up only makes you weaker. What matters is to observe, remember, and act at the right time." So that night, after they went to bed, I sat in Edris's office and opened the safe. Inside were the house deed in my name, the property insurance, the property tax records, and the will I updated after Edris died. I laid everything on the desk, squared them up. On each page, a red stamp read clearly, "Owner, Nora E. Whitfield." I smiled, a thin smile, not happy, just clear-eyed. The next morning, I brewed coffee like always. The smell of fresh roast filled the air, the scent that reminds me I'm still in control. I added a pinch of cinnamon, Edris's old habit, then sat at the kitchen table. Aubrey walked in, hand on her belly, voice gentle. "Good morning, Mom. I wanted to ask, did you look over those flyers last night?" I sipped my coffee, the bitterness coating my tongue. "Yes, I'll consider it." I kept the same smile. She didn't know I'd already installed an automatic recording app on my phone to save every conversation in the house. I started an incident log. Every nurse knows how important that is. Whenever something was moved or a casual comment was made, I wrote it down: date, time, who said it, to whom, and what it was. Under each line, I put a star if it felt off. March 12, Aubrey changed the curtains. Reason: brighter for the baby. March 15, wedding photo vanished from the wall. Reason: to avoid dust. March 20, Caleb slept out. Reason: Aubrey needs quiet. Every night I looked at the log like I was gathering evidence for a case the patient didn't know they had. The house grew strange to me. Each morning Aubrey played soft music, called it pregnancy therapy. She floated through the living room in silk sleeves, hand always on her belly like a leading lady in a film about motherhood, while I, the actual mother of this home, was pushed into a silent, supporting role. I heard her tell a friend on the phone, "I love my mother-in-law, but she stresses the baby out. We need to get her somewhere else so she can rest." The voice was sugar-sweet, but underneath it was the smell of cold metal. I still went to the market, still cooked, still tended the garden, but everything I did became a thorn in her eye. One morning, I was on the phone with my sister in Chicago when Aubrey came down, annoyed. "When did you call, Mom?" "Around 10 o'clock. That's the middle of my morning sleep." "You know, the doctor says pregnant women need their morning rest. Your talking is a bit loud." I looked at her and only said, "I'll keep that in mind." In my head, I marked a red star in the log. I added a doorbell camera. Aubrey thought I was worried about security, but I wanted to know who came and went when Caleb was out. I also placed a small recorder in the living room cabinet. Everything I did was slow and careful, like chess. No need to win now, just make sure when it's my move, the other side has nowhere to go. On the third night after the move-out breakfast, Caleb said he'd sleep at work for convenience. I knew he was following his wife's plan so she could rest. I heard the car door close. Then the house fell quiet. Upstairs, Aubrey turned on the light in my room, the one Edris and I had used, and paced around, measuring and taking notes. I stood at the bottom of the stairs and looked up, saying nothing. Some things you only need to see to understand. That evening, I poured myself a glass of red wine and sat by the window facing the lake. The water rippled under the moon, calm in a way that felt suspicious. I missed Edris, the way he used to say, "You know, Nora, winning doesn't come from shouting, it comes from the kind of silence that scares people." I set the glass down, opened my laptop, and emailed attorney Alan Mercer, the man who helped me with paperwork after Edris passed. "Hi, Alan. I need to reconfirm my property ownership. Need to meet in person. Monday morning work?" The reply came faster than I expected. "Of course, Nora. Bring the originals, I'll verify." I closed the laptop and leaned back, listening to the wind moving through the oaks on the porch. In the dark, I wasn't afraid. I was clearer than ever. The next morning, before the sun climbed, I got up early, brewed coffee, and made a few cinnamon waffles, habits I've never dropped. Aubrey came down, surprised to see me already having breakfast. "Where are you off to so early?" she asked, syrupy sweet. "To the bank for a bit," I said, picking up my purse. "The bank? Are you withdrawing money?" "I just want to review a few old things. Like the deed, for instance." She froze for half a second, but I pretended not to notice. Driving to the law office, the early spring wind was biting, but I felt warm inside. Warm because I knew I wasn't helpless anymore. Warm because no matter how hard they tried to scrub me from this house, there was one thing they could never erase: my signature on the land papers. I stopped at a cafe by the lake, took out my notebook, and wrote another line. March 22. They think I'll leave, but I'm coming back, one step at a time. I sipped coffee and watched the morning light over the water. The wind carried the scent of pine and the chatter of sparrows. I knew this fight wasn't about the house, it was about the right to exist in my own life. As I left the cafe, my phone buzzed. A text from Alan Mercer, confirmed. "You are the sole owner. No co-ownership, no liens." I smiled as the wind lifted my gray hair off my shoulders. "Well then, let's begin," I whispered. If my daughter-in-law wanted quiet for the baby, I'd give her the quiet she wanted after the storm I was preparing rolled through. 2 days after meeting the lawyer, I came home feeling oddly calm. I thought things would stay quiet longer, but the pause was only for Aubrey to prepare her next script. That morning, she stood in the kitchen with a pale green smoothie, speaking evenly and clearly like she'd rehearsed. "The doctor says, at this stage, the most important thing is to avoid stress. Noise, arguments, or emotional swings can affect the fetus. I'd just come in from the garden, dirt still on my hands. Are you telling me this? I asked, keeping my tone light. Aubrey turned and gave a polite smile. It's not blaming you, Mom, just sometimes when you call or move around early, I wake up startled. My body needs morning rest. The doctor emphasized that. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and looked at her. 30 years in the ER. I've heard every sort of excuse and phrasing from patients, but there's no such thing in medicine as pregnancy stress caused by mother-in-law talking at 10 a.m. What Aubrey was saying wasn't medical advice, it was a memorized performance. That so? I smiled. I'll try to walk softly and speak quietly. Aubrey nodded, satisfied. She thought I'd stepped neatly into the supporting role she wrote for me. That evening, Caleb came home late. I sat on the porch, heard the car pull in, his heavy steps on the brick path. He looked tired, shoulders slumped. I poured him tea and asked softly, "Have you eaten?" He shook his head. Aubrey was exhausted all day. I grabbed something outside. I nodded and waited. Sure enough, a few seconds later he looked at me, hesitant. "Mom, I know. Things are tense, but please try to be understanding with Aubrey. She's trying to stay healthy. The doctor says stress can trigger contractions." I set the cup down slowly and said nothing. I just filed the exact wording in my head. That night, when everyone slept, I opened my leather journal and wrote it down. Caleb, 9:10 p.m. Please be understanding with Aubrey. The doctor says stress can trigger contractions. I added a note. Even tone. Avoided eye contact, repeating his wife's lines. The next day, while I was sweeping the porch, Mrs. Mildred, the neighbor across the street, came over, greeting me as she spoke. "Nora, I hear your daughter-in-law is having a bit of a rough time in the pregnancy? Poor thing, you must be worried." I looked up. "She told you that?" Mildred gave a polite smile. "Just small talk. She said she's been tired lately because there are too many people in the house. You know how it is, pregnant women are sensitive." I didn't answer right away. I only smiled lightly, but inside I went cold for a beat. Aubrey was spreading her own story. A narrative woven out of pity and cleverness, and her first audience was the neighbors. That afternoon, while Caleb was at work, I tried another tack. I stepped into the living room and spoke to Aubrey, who was knitting. "If you need more quiet, I can adjust my routine. I'll make calls in my room, won't turn on the TV in the mornings, even work in the garden so you can rest. Would that help?" Aubrey looked up with a thin smile. "You're so sweet, Mom. But long term, I think you should have your own space. Not for me, for you. You deserve to rest and not worry about anyone." Her voice was soft as honey, but the sentence was an eviction notice. I got it. The quiet she wanted wasn't peace, it was my absence. That night, I mentally took inventory. I realized things had gone missing without my noticing. The cedar chest where I kept Edris's letters was no longer at the foot of my bed. The blue porcelain set I bought in New Orleans 10 years ago, my pride was gone from the cabinet. The anniversary quilt Edris gave me for our 30th temporarily stored in the basement, per Aubrey. I went down to the basement to check. It was cold, dark, and stuffy. Among cardboard boxes labeled in black marker, I saw one marked, "Mom's Kitchen." I opened it. There were my dishes, wrapped in old newspaper, dust settling over them like proof of deliberate forgetting. I closed the lid and exhaled slowly. I knew that if I reacted, she'd have more evidence that I'm easily agitated. So I chose silence. But my silence didn't mean surrender. From then on, I realized Aubrey had her own language of manipulation. Everything she said began with 3 words. For the baby. For the baby, don't run the washer in the morning. For the baby, don't cook strong-smelling food. For the future, you should rest. For my health, you should go out more. Each word was light as thread but tight as rope. She never gave orders, but made you feel guilty if you didn't comply. I could see myself being rewritten as the villain in her story, the selfish old mother who won't make room for the new generation. I didn't argue. I started acting. That night, I opened a small box in my desk and took out a mini recorder I used back when I was a nurse to log shifts. I dusted it off, put in fresh batteries, and set it under the bookshelf in the living room where Aubrey liked to make calls. It's small enough to go unnoticed, but the mic is very sensitive. I also changed the lock on the file cabinet holding the deed, insurance, and savings. I didn't want to wake up to find they'd been temporarily stored somewhere else. A few days later, while I was watering the porch plants, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, a screenshot of a group chat called Mommy and Friends. Aubrey's message stood out. End of this month, I'm clearing the mother-in-law's room for the nursery. We'll repaint it cream, way less gloomy. Below it, her friend commented, Nice. Wish my MIL would move out early like that. I stared at the screen and felt my hand tremble not from anger, but from contempt. I saved the image into the Evidence 2 folder, then copied it to an external drive. Every data point, every line, was a link in a chain. I didn't need to rage, I just needed to be thorough. That afternoon, I heard Aubrey laughing in the living room, voice high and bright. Of course it's exhausting. She always thinks she's right. But I'm about to have a beautiful room, just wait. Her friend's voice chimed in through the phone, music playing faintly. You deserve it. Pregnant women should be prioritized. Aubrey lowered her voice. Caleb won't push back. He just wants a quiet life. I stood behind the kitchen door, hearing every word clearly. I wanted to laugh a laugh with no joy in it. Caleb doesn't push back, true, but not pushing back isn't the same as agreeing. Some people choose silence to avoid confrontation, and that silence slowly kills them. I went back to the table, opened my journal, and wrote the day's last line, March 29. Aubrey confirms clearing Mill's room for the nursery. Confident tone, no fear. Confidence is her first weakness. I closed the journal, set the pen on the cover, and let my eyes rest on Edris's small photo on the shelf. You see this, don't you? I whispered. They think I've grown weak, but you know Nora Whitfield has never been weak. I turned off the lights and let the house settle into quiet darkness. Somewhere upstairs, Aubrey was still murmuring through a prenatal meditation, her voice steady like a lullaby of deceit. I reclined and listened to the wind slip through the window, carrying the smell of young pine and the soft lap of the lake. I knew I would sleep deeply tonight. The more this went on, the more certain I was that the game had only just begun. And I, the one they call the source of stress, am the quiet they'll soon have to face with fear. That morning I had just finished watering the carnations on the porch when I heard the click of high heels inside. Not my sound. Aubrey's the woman who walked through my house like its owner. When I stepped in, she was seated at the dining table with a glossy stack of large pages and a smile that was a bit too bright. "Oh, there you are, Mom," she chirped. "I just found something. I think you'll like it." On the table lay a cream brochure reading, Maple Ridge Senior Living, where a peaceful chapter begins. I know the format, clean, easy to read. Photos of seniors beaming in flower gardens or yoga rooms. A manufactured happiness ad designed to convince older people they're choosing freedom, not being left behind. Aubrey opened it, her pale pink nails sliding over each page. "Look, Mom, the rooms are bright, with big windows facing the garden. They have transportation, diet-planned meals, and a Friday dance club. You'll make lots of new friends." I looked closer. A single-window studio, pale red brick, with a photo of a silver-haired woman reading beside a plastic flower vase. In the top corner, a red pen circled around that image with a handwritten note, perfect for her. "You looked into this thoroughly?" I asked, steady. Aubrey smiled lightly. "Yes, I just did some homework first, so you don't have to do the heavy lifting. Maple Ridge is only 20 minutes away by car, with its own shuttle for shopping and appointments. Super convenient, Mom. Right then, Caleb walked in, tie still undone. He set his phone down and glanced at the brochure. You should check it out, Mom. It's nice there. No more yard work or fixing pipes. Staff handles everything. You can just relax. I rested my hand on the back of a chair and looked at them both. The room went so still it felt like the air stopped moving. I asked slowly, word by word, "Did you forget who's on the deed to this house?" They froze. Caleb's eyes slid to Aubrey, waiting for her lead. She blinked, then let out a small laugh, a little flustered. "Oh, Mom, of course no one forgot. I just thought maybe you'd be more comfortable there. I'm only thinking of the baby." I smiled. "Right, for the baby." I pulled out a chair, sat down, and lifted my coffee, blowing on it. "This place does look peaceful." "Exactly," Aubrey said, her voice lightening, thinking I'd softened. "If you agree, I can set up a tour with the manager. Maple Ridge has a special move-in before the end of the month, and the first month's free." I set the cup down and nudged the brochure back toward her. "Interesting, but I need to think carefully. After all, people say if you want to move out, you should own the place you live in first." Aubrey's smile stiffened a little. Caleb rushed to smooth things over, forcing a laugh. "We just want to help you, Mom. There's nothing else behind it." "Of course," I answered, steady voice, calm eyes. "I believe that." I stood up and carried my coffee cup to the sink. No one said another word. I could hear Aubrey exhale softly, like she'd just dodged danger she didn't quite understand. That night, after they'd both gone to their room, I sat in the office and opened my laptop. The cream brochure was still on the desk, the lamp shining on the words, "A place to belong." I gave a small laugh. "A place to belong?" I've belonged to this house for 40 years. There's no reason to trade it for a 300-square-foot apartment just because someone else finds it convenient. I opened the safe, took out the original house file, and scanned each page one by one. Deed, title insurance, property, taxes, proof of homeowner's insurance. I double-checked every page, everything intact. No one has the right to touch it. I saved them in a private folder, set a passcode, and emailed the whole set to myself with the subject line, "Private, for my eyes only." Done. I opened my messages and texted attorney Alan Mercer. "Alan, please reconfirm my sole ownership of the Lakewood property. No co-owners, no liens, no transfers. Need confirmation as soon as possible." His reply came in under 10 minutes. Checked. "The house is in your name only, completely clean. I'll send a notarized copy in the morning." I looked at the message and felt lighter. Not because of the house, but because I knew I still had the right to keep the one thing my husband left me. I printed a copy that night, sealed it in a flat envelope, and wrote neatly on the front, "Legal property of Nora Whitfield." I wouldn't use it yet. I just needed it ready for a show and tell at the right moment. The next morning, sunlight passed through the new curtains, a pale beige Aubrey had put up last week. I sipped my coffee and listened to her moving around. She'd started acting like the house was already hers. She opened cabinets, rearranged dishes, then cleared the lower shelves too. "Mom, I'm just tidying a bit," she said, "so when the baby comes, we'll have a clean space." I nodded, smiling. "Go ahead. Just don't touch the cabinet in my office." "Of course," she said without looking at me. At noon, I heard her on the phone in the hallway. "Yes, I think once my mother-in-law moves out, we can repaint the living room walls cream. I'll send you the new design tonight." Her voice was low, but I heard the two words clearly. "Moves out." She passed by me in the kitchen, face bright like that conversation hadn't happened. "I'm making a salad. Want some, Mom?" "Sure," I said, sitting down. "You seem busy." "Oh, just little things," she smiled. "Getting ready before the baby arrives." When she turned to grab a knife, I noticed the Maple Ridge brochure still in the kitchen drawer, the fold-worn proof she'd looked at it many times. That afternoon, when Caleb got home, I was reading on the porch. He sat next to me, quiet for a moment, then said, "Mom, I know yesterday was a little clumsy. Aubrey only wants what's best." "What's best for who?" I asked, eyes on the paper. He stayed silent a few seconds. "For all of us." I folded the paper and looked out toward the lake. "Son, sometimes people say for everyone, but they really mean for themselves. I've seen that more often than you think." Caleb sighed softly. "I just don't want misunderstandings between you and her." "Misunderstandings?" I gave a small smile. "There are no misunderstandings here, Caleb." I heard everything. I set a hand on his shoulder and patted it. "Don't worry. I'm not going to argue. I'll just remind you of one thing: I know exactly whose name is on this house. And I know when it's time to remind others, too." He looked at me, confused, then gave a small nod. "I understand." That night, as the house lights dimmed, I was still awake. I stood at the window and looked down at the garden Edris and I tended for 40 years. The tulip rows were budding, fresh green grass pushed up through damp soil. I remembered Edris once said, "Don't let someone plant in your garden before you know what they plan to pick." I smiled, closed the curtains. Downstairs, the living room light still glowed. Aubrey was tidying, or rather, doing a full run-through. I heard porcelain clink, measured footsteps in every corner. She was rehearsing her part, the new owner of the house. I went to bed, turned off the light, and thought, "Keep going, Aubrey. The better you perform, the harder your fall when the curtain drops." That afternoon, while I trimmed the lavender along the fence, Paula Delaney, my next-door neighbor on the right, walked over. She's a few years older than me, small frame, softly curled hair, always carrying a hint of rose. She held out a bag of freshly picked apples and spoke as if casually, "Nora, I don't mean to pry, but yesterday I had to stop by the Crescent Hotel, the one across from the gas station, and I saw Aubrey with a man." I paused my shears. "What man?" Paula lowered her voice. "I don't know his name, but he wore a dark suit, drove a black Lexus, confident build, around 40. I recognized Aubrey by her hair and that cream coat she often wears. They didn't look around, just walked in holding hands. I called her name, but she acted like she didn't hear. I kept my composure, smiled, and accepted the apples. "Maybe you saw wrong," I said softly, but inside, the pieces started to shift. That night I wrote in my journal, "April 2nd, Paula Delaney says she saw Aubrey with an unknown man at the Crescent Hotel. Description: dark suit, silver watch, black Lexus, not Caleb." I reread it several times, stopping on "not Caleb." Some things you don't want to believe, but a woman's intuition, especially after nearly 7 decades, rarely misses. 3 nights later, close to midnight, I woke to a soft laugh from the living room. That laugh was light and flirtatious, but completely different from Aubrey's voice when she spoke in front of Caleb. It sounded truer, freer, more bare. I stepped down the stairs slowly, careful not to make a sound. In the warm spill from the living room, I saw 2 shadows on the wall, a tall, broad-shouldered man lounging in a chair, Aubrey leaning toward him, a glass of wine in her hand. The man's voice was low and confident. "Told you, it's only a matter of time. Once everything's set, you'll have what you want," Aubrey answered, breathy. "I'm just scared of being found out." "No one suspects a thing," he chuckled. "Just let it all look natural. I'll take care of you and of our baby." A chill ran up my spine. "Our baby?" Those 2 words cut like ice. I didn't step in. I walked into the kitchen instead and turned the faucet on hard, letting the rush of water serve as a warning bell. The voices in the living room softened. A few seconds later, Aubrey came into the kitchen in a silk nightgown, smoothing her hair. "You're still up, Mom?" she asked lightly, like nothing had happened. "I was thirsty," I said. "Can't sleep?" She smiled, eyes flicking toward the living room. "Just watching TV, those late-night cooking shows." "Got company?" I asked, though I knew the answer. Aubrey shook her head with a tight smile. "No. Who would visit at this hour?" I held her gaze for a few seconds, then nodded and turned off the water. "Right. Cooking shows this late? Must be quite interesting." She said nothing, then slipped away quickly. I heard a door close softly, men's shoes glide over hardwood, and minutes later, an engine start in the driveway. The next morning, Aubrey acted like nothing happened. She blended a smoothie, put on meditation music, and talked about redesigning the nursery. Caleb kept leaving early and coming home late, repeating a line like he'd been hypnotized. "Aubrey needs to rest, Mom. Please don't add pressure." I just smiled and didn't argue, but I started gathering evidence. I opened the smart doorbell app I'd installed weeks before, the kind with motion detection and auto record. Sure enough, the history showed a clip at 11:47 p.m. A tall man in a dark suit entering the house without looking up at the camera. I zoomed in and caught his left wrist glinting a big silver watch. I downloaded the clip and named it Crescent Entry 11:47 p.m. From then on, I watched Caleb's work schedule closer. He said he had back-to-back shifts at the company, even overnights. Aubrey, meanwhile, was freer than ever. She entertained guests, signed for personal packages, and sometimes disappeared for hours with no explanation. I started logging everything. April 4th, black Lexus parked out front at 8:15 p.m. Camera captures a male figure matching April 2nd. April 5th, Caleb says he's sleeping at work. 10:32 p.m. Doorbell light on for 2 minutes. Motion detected. No clear face. April 6th. Aubrey on a living room call. "Don't worry. Things are moving." I felt like I was living in a play where I was both witness and audience. One afternoon, while Caleb was at work, I heard a car stop out front. I peeked through the curtain. That same black Lexus. The man got out this time. I saw more clearly. Around 40, tall, broad shoulders, dark hair with some gray, an Omega watch on his wrist, perfectly fitted navy suit. He rang the bell. Unhurried. Seconds later, Aubrey opened the door, her face lighting up without thinking. He brushed her cheek before stepping inside, so intimate it couldn't be just friends. I stayed behind the kitchen door, heart pounding but strangely clear-headed. This was Graham Pierce. I knew his name from an event card that fell out of Aubrey's coat pocket the other day. A business dinner for Pierce Financial Group. The timing lined up perfectly. I didn't confront them. Not yet. I let them get a little more confident so my trap would be fuller. I opened my phone and checked the camera app. The picture was clear. Graham came in carrying a shopping bag, set it on the table. They sat close, laughing. I turned on remote audio recording and saved the whole conversation. "Graham, I'm getting everything in place. Once she moves out, the house will be in your name." "You know that." Aubrey. "I'm afraid his mother will find out." Graham. "She won't suspect a thing. Just play the exhausted wife. People will pity you." Aubrey. "I can't stand this anymore. I want it over fast." Graham. "Patience, my love. You'll have it all." When it ended, I sat in the dark and replayed it, my hands still cold. So for the baby, for health, for the future, it was all dialogue and a plan to take what wasn't theirs. From then on, I opened a new folder on my computer called Crescent. I saved everything inside: photos of the Lexus, camera videos, audio files, the event log, even a copy of Paula's message. I organized it like a medical chart, tagging each item by date and time. I know this much: people who think they're smarter than everyone else make the same mistakes. They leave trails. Aubrey is too young. Graham is too arrogant. The next night, I heard a car again, this time not the Lexus, but a borrowed sedan. The engine cut off, silence settled. I stayed in bed, eyes open. No need to go downstairs, I just grabbed my phone and opened the camera app. The image popped up, Aubrey opening the door in a robe, eyes gleaming. Quick note, April 8th, Graham Pierce shows up for the third time this week. Time, 11:06 p.m., Caleb out. I looked at the screen and murmured to myself, "Go on, Aubrey. Keep believing I'm blind." Outside, the night wind moved through the garden, lavender stalks trembling. Soft laughter floated from the living room, glasses clinked. I closed my eyes, no longer hurt, only cold with the clarity of someone who knows a new chapter is coming, and I'm the only one holding the pen. I opened the Crescent folder and added one more line to the notes file. Prep for the reveal. The more they believe, the cleaner the evidence. And I smiled, a small smile like a breath in the night, holding a quiet promise. They won't know what's waiting on the other side of this door. That Saturday morning, I came home earlier than planned after stopping by the lakeside flower shop. I thought I'd spend the day reorganizing the memory cabinet in the living room, the place I used to keep our wedding photo, a few family pictures, and the crystal vase Edris brought back from Paris in 1982. But as I turned into the drive, I knew something was wrong. Nearly a dozen strange cars packing the yard, the gate wide open, music and laughter spilling from the house. I got out, still holding a bunch of pink tulips. From the porch I could see through the living room glass, people moving around, blush pink and pale blue everywhere. Balloons, cake, ribbons, and a wood sign with big letters, "Baby Sprinkle, celebrating Mommy to be Aubrey." I stood still. No one had told me about this party. The first feeling wasn't anger, it was a strange emptiness. I pushed the door open. No one noticed me. The music swallowed the sound of it. A group of young women, dressed to the nines, were laughing around a table draped in white lace. On the table, among the cake and gifts, I saw a black and white ultrasound frame placed at the center, next to a sign, "Welcome, Little Pierce Whitfield." I froze. They'd spliced Pierce onto my family name. I looked around. Every family photo of mine was gone. My wedding picture with Edris, Caleb's graduation photo, even Edris's memorial portrait by the vase gone. In their place, ultrasound images, greeting cards, the words, "New Beginnings." I could hear my heart beat faintly, but each beat was sharp. Aubrey came out of the kitchen, belly round, white lace dress, a pale pink sash across her chest glittering, Mom-to-be. She saw me eyes wide for half a second, then quickly put on a warm smile. "Mom! Oh, I didn't think you'd be home this early. We wanted to surprise you." Maybe the surprise came a bit too soon. She smiled, but there was something colder than the tile under my feet in that smile. I nodded slightly and said quietly, "Looks like you've all been busy." "Yes, we wanted the house to feel fresher, to match the happy mood." She glanced around and lowered her voice just enough for me to hear. "It's wonderful to have extra space like this, isn't it, Mom?" Those words, extra space, landed like a light but solid knock on the wall. I knew exactly what it meant. Not a compliment, but a notice that I'd been erased from the frame. I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled out my phone and pretended to snap a few keepsake photos. In truth, I photographed the entire room, every detail, every bare spot where Edris's picture used to hang. I moved slowly, like a proud mother documenting her child's party, but my lens was capturing the evidence of a takeover. As I passed the kitchen, I heard a low voice in the corner, a familiar male voice. I paused, took half a step back, pretending to check my phone. Through the crack in the door, I saw a man in a dark suit with a bright silver watch, Graham Pierce. He was handing Aubrey a white envelope, and she quickly tucked it into the pink sash across her chest. I went still. No one brings an envelope to a baby sprinkle unless it isn't a congratulatory note. "You're sure?" Aubrey's voice was low, a little shaky. "Absolutely. After the baby's born, he'll take care of it," Graham said. I didn't mishear it. "He'll take care of it." His voice was so clear I could hear the breaths between the words. I tapped record on my phone, set it to voice memo, and slipped it into my pocket. I stood there for nearly a minute, until laughter and glass clinks rose up again. They came out smiling like nothing had happened. I stepped in with a calm smile. "Sorry, I forgot to grab more plates." Graham looked at me, hesitated, then gave a polite nod. "Hello, Mrs. Whitfield. I'm a friend of Caleb's." "Of course," I said. "I've heard a lot about you." The answer unsettled his eyes for a second. Aubrey jumped in fast. "Graham works at the same company as Caleb, Mom." "Oh, great. Then you two must really understand each other," I said evenly, face unchanged. I glanced at the envelope corner peeking from the sash and turned away as if I hadn't noticed. The party went on loud and sparkling, like a carefully staged set. I sat in a corner and watched. Aubrey's friends kept praising how cozy the house felt, marveling that she'd pulled off such a big party so close to her due date. Someone joked, "This place looks straight out of a magazine." "The lady of the house has such great taste." The lady of the house. No one realized the real owner sat in the corner, smiling quietly like a spectator at a tragicomedy. I listened, missing nothing. While they toasted and talked about the future, the small tells stood out. The ring Graham set on the table, the way Aubrey looked at him across the crowd, their hands brushing under the tablecloth. Those details spoke louder than anything they said. I pulled out my phone to check the voice memo was still recording. Laughter, chatter, and then a crisp exchange. "Graham, he believes you now, right?" "Aubrey, completely. He doesn't suspect a thing." "Graham, good. Now we just wait for the baby to be born. And I'll handle the rest." I stopped the recording and saved the file under the name Sprinkle Proof. Then I opened the camera and did another slow pan. This time deliberately catching Graham's face in the frame and his hand resting lightly on Aubrey's back. The afternoon drifted by like fog. As guests started to leave, I stayed, smiling and shaking hands with each person. Everyone thought I was the easygoing, chill, understanding mother-in-law. One of Aubrey's young friends even said, "I wish my mother-in-law were like you, so everything could be this peaceful." I just smiled and said quietly, "You're mistaken, this isn't peace yet." When the last door closed, the house fell silent. Balloons sagged, crumbs of cake stuck to the tile. Aubrey and Graham had stepped outside with a few friends to see guests off. I used those minutes to back up the photos and audio to an external drive and emailed everything to my private account. Folder name, Crescent Sprinkle Proofs. When they came back in, I was already standing on the stairs, still holding the pink tulips from that morning, their stems not yet in water. "Nice party," I said. "Thanks, Mom," Aubrey replied, voice light as if she had no idea what I'd seen. "Yeah, just one pity," I said, walking slowly toward my room. "What's that?" "It's a pity Edris didn't get to witness this. He would have found it interesting." She went quiet. I saw a flash of caution in her eyes, then it disappeared. That night, when the house was still, I sat alone in the office, desk lamp spilling light over the property file, printed stills of Graham and Aubrey from the door camera, and the audio file I had just downloaded. Each small piece of evidence clicked into place like tiles in a final mosaic. I opened email and typed a short note to attorney Alan Mercer. "Alan, I think we have enough to proceed with step 1. Prepare everything. I'll be in touch in the morning." I hit send and closed the laptop. Outside, wind moved through the pines, carrying the smell of rain and the whisper of leaves. I felt no hurt, no anger, only a cold, steady clarity. I stood, turned off the light, and went to my room. Tomorrow, the storm arrives. But tonight, I'll sleep well because this time I'm the one holding the knife by the handle. The next morning, first light filtered through thin curtains and washed over the long dining table where everything was about to happen. I'd prepped the night before a thick, crisp file, plastic-sleeved and tucked neatly into a pale yellow rigid envelope. On the front, in bold print, I'd written, "Property deed, 112 Lakewood Drive." I made coffee, so calm it surprised me. The house was quiet. The click of the coffee maker echoed in the dim. I felt no tremor, no anger, only the certainty that it was time to put everything back where it belonged. Around 10 a.m., Caleb's car sounded at the gate. The door opened. He walked in with Aubrey and two of her friends, Kara and Melissa, the same faces I'd glimpsed at the baby sprinkle. They laughed loudly, carrying gift bags and pastel-wrapped packages. I was already seated at the table, coffee on my right, the envelope squarely in the middle. "Oh, you're up early, Mom," Aubrey chirped, a little too confident. "I invited my two friends over. We're planning the official baby shower. Hope you don't mind?" "Of course not," I said lightly. "Actually, I've got something to say too, and it's even better with all of you here." That sentence made all four of them pause. Caleb pulled out a chair, looking briefly uneasy, while Aubrey kept smiling, though her mouth tightened. I opened the envelope and slid out the notarized deed white paper, black letters, a round stamp. I set it in the center, turned the text to face them. "This," I said calmly, "is the ownership document for this house." I waited a beat and looked straight at my son. "This house is in my name, mine alone. No co-owners, no liens, no transfers, all fully legal." The room went so quiet it felt like someone had sucked the air out. Kara, Aubrey's blonde friend, blinked, eyes darting around, clearly unsure what she'd walked into. Melissa pressed her lips together and glanced at Aubrey. Caleb picked up the paper, his eyes tracking each line, every legal clause, every stamp, every number. When he reached sole ownership, Nora Whitfield, his face fell and his shoulders slumped. "Mom, what do you mean?" Caleb asked softly, voice shaking. "It means," I said, still even, "everything in this house, from the porch to the fence to the ground under your feet, belongs to me, no one else." Aubrey let out a brittle laugh, trying to hide her panic. "Mom, you're scaring me. We never said the house wasn't yours. Why so tense about it?" I met her eyes, cold as a December lake. "No one's tense. I just like clarity, and paperwork doesn't lie." A heavy silence followed. The air shifted, thickened, as if an invisible wall had just risen across the table. Kara and Melissa glanced at each other, feeling the tension but too cautious to speak. Aubrey pressed her palms on the table, leaned forward, trying to regain control. "Mom, this isn't the way to talk to us in front of guests. We're family." I looked at her and answered gently, "Because we're family. I need to say this in front of others so everyone hears it clearly." In that moment, Aubrey lost control for the first time. She straightened, face flushed, anger flashing where fake sweetness used to be. "Are you trying to humiliate me?" "No," I said. "You're doing that on your own." The room froze. Caleb sank into his chair, fingers laced together. I could hear him swallow, trying to choke down pride and confusion. I knew right then the first crack had appeared. Aubrey turned to her friends, voice trembling but trying to sound normal. "Sorry, must be the pregnancy hormones making me extra sensitive." Kara popped up fast. "It's okay, maybe we should grab supplies before lunch." The two gathered their things and left faster than the wind. As the door clicked shut, I stood, slid the papers back into the envelope, placed it in the buffet drawer, turned the key, and locked it in full view. "Now," I said, "everything's clear. No arguments, no misunderstandings. I just want us all to understand exactly where things stand." Caleb said nothing. He leaned back, eyes fixed on the hardwood, unable to meet anyone's gaze. His silence was no longer complicity, it was collapse. I could see it in his eyes, faith wobbling, a fine dust of doubt settling over everything Aubrey had said. Aubrey saw it too. She rushed to him and set a hand on his shoulder. "Don't listen to her, babe. We never meant to take anything from her." Caleb didn't answer. He closed his eyes. I need some air. Then he stood and walked out without looking back. The door shut, leaving Aubrey and me in a room as still as stone. She pressed her lips together, eyes dark. You really think you've won? I smiled, voice low and unhurried. No, I've only just begun. That afternoon my phone buzzed non-stop. Messages from Aubrey poured in. Mom, we need to talk. You're misunderstanding me. I don't know why you're doing this, but you're hurting Caleb. Don't destroy my family. I didn't reply. Not out of anger, but because it wasn't necessary. Each text came and went like weak gusts against a locked window. I opened my laptop and went to my private inbox. In drafts, I typed, Alan, please draft a 30-day notice to vacate. Reasons: unlawful occupancy, unauthorized alterations, and emotional damages. I'll sign when the final version is ready. I hit send. The screen glowed, reflecting off the table where the deed had lain. Outside, Lakewood was still. Wind skimmed the pines, a faint rustle like the first crack spidering through the house's fake shell. I said to myself softly, just a hairline crack, but from there, everything will split. Then I closed the laptop, lifted my cooled coffee, looked up at the white wall where my wedding photo used to hang, and smiled slowly. It's all right. Pictures can be taken down, but this house is still mine. And soon, they'll learn some walls can speak, and they know how to deliver justice. The next morning, dew still clung to Lakewood. Thin light like foil slipped through the kitchen window. I sat at the table with a steaming mug of coffee. On the table lay a cream folder, the 30-day notice to vacate that attorney Alan Mercer had sent last night. Short, proper, fully supported by law. Under the bold headline were the reasons: unlawful occupation, unauthorized interior changes, emotional and material damage. I reread those 3 phrases. Each word carried the weight of long nights spent watching, enduring, and collecting evidence. Today, I didn't need to hide anymore. I slid the notice into an envelope, sealed it, and placed it on the table. When Aubrey's footsteps sounded on the stairs, I took a steady breath. "Good morning, Mom," she said, voice a bit hoarse, hair still mussed from a restless night. "Morning," I answered calmly. "I have something for you." She eyed the envelope, curious. "What is it?" "Paperwork." I pushed it toward her. "Notice to vacate in 30 days. Effective today." The air went solid. Aubrey stood frozen, clutching the envelope without opening it. "What did you say?" I said. I enunciated. "You two have 30 days to leave. The reasons are listed: unlawful occupation, unauthorized changes, and emotional harm." She gave a strained laugh, voice cracking. "I'm pregnant. You can't throw a pregnant woman out of a house." I looked straight into her eyes, unblinking. Pregnancy isn't a license to take what isn't yours. In that instant, I saw the mask split. Her mouth opened, then shut, breath quickening. "You're cruel," she whispered. "People will think you're heartless." I shrugged. "People can think whatever they like. I have proof." That evening, as I was clearing the table, Caleb came home. His face was drawn, eyes shadowed. He stood in the kitchen doorway, keys still in hand, voice low. "Mom, I know you're angry, but please, don't do this. At least wait until after the baby's born. I don't want a child starting life like that." I dried my hands and turned around. "Do you really believe that child is yours, Caleb?" The second the question left my mouth, the room fell into absolute silence. Only the wall clock ticked, loud enough to raise. Goosebumps. Caleb stared at me, brow furrowed like he was hearing a foreign language. "What did you just say?" I held his gaze. "I asked if you're sure that baby is yours." He didn't answer right away. His fists tightened, then loosened. In his eyes I saw a chaos, suspicion, shame, and a swelling kind of hurt. He said quietly. "Of course it's mine. Why would you say that?" Of course, I repeated softly. Or do you just want to believe that? Caleb bowed his head and stayed silent for a long time. I didn't add another word. I poured him a cup of coffee, slid it toward him, and stepped away. Some questions don't need answers because silence already is one. That night, alone in the office, I logged everything in my journal. April 17th, 9 p.m. Delivered 30-day notice to Aubrey. Reaction: shock, pregnancy as shield. Reply: pregnancy isn't a license to take what isn't yours. Caleb begged to delay until after the birth. Asked, are you sure the baby is yours? Hesitation, no answer. Status: faith beginning to wobble, cracks spreading. I closed the book and pinned a new calendar sheet to the cabinet. I marked the 30th day in red and wrote a small note beneath. Deadline 30 days. I stared at that number for a long time. 30 days, not long, but enough to expose everything. 2 days later, Aubrey launched an image war. She posted a belly photo on social media. Caption: when your mother-in-law kicks you out at 8 months pregnant, remember, God sees. Below it, dozens of pitying comments, sympathy, attacks on the heartless mill. I read every line and only smiled. Hours later, she called me, voice choked. People are asking what happened. I don't know what to say. Do you want the whole world to hate me? I don't need the world to hate anyone, I said evenly. I just need the truth. What truth? How far will you go to humiliate me? I opened my Biznown laptop and tapped a few keys, tone calm. If you want to talk truth, I can send you copies of the photos, audio, and camera logs. She went quiet. I could hear her breath quicken on the line. Are you threatening me? No, I said. I'm reminding you the file is complete. She hung up. 3 minutes later, I got texts. You won't destroy me. I'll make everyone believe me. I'll protect this child at all costs. I read them without anger. I only felt pity. A young woman using emotion to hide the truth while the evidence lined up, waiting for daylight. That afternoon, I went to Dr. Karen Doyle's clinic, a former colleague from my nursing days. I laid things out briefly and asked, if we need a paternity test after the birth, how does that work? Karen looked at me, frowning a little. Nora, are you sure? This isn't small. I'm not sure, I said. Which is why I need the truth. She nodded, her voice softening. When the baby is born, if the legal parents both consent, it's straightforward. If there's a dispute, you'll need legal paperwork. Legal paperwork I have, I said. And I can get more if needed. Karen was quiet for a moment, then said, I understand. I'll help. I left the clinic feeling slightly lighter. Things were moving in the right direction, even if it wasn't a pleasant one. Late that night, Caleb knocked on my door. He came in and sat opposite me, fingers knotted together. The desk lamp lit his face tired, but for the first time, clearer. Mom, he said softly, I need to ask you straight. Do you have proof? I mean, about Aubrey and that man? I looked at him for a long moment. Do you want the truth? He nodded. I opened my laptop without a word. On the screen, the video and audio files appeared. I didn't hit play, just let him see the titles. Crescent, Entry, 11:47 p.m., Sprinkle, Proof, Audio, Living Room. Caleb didn't touch the keyboard. He just looked, and I saw the moment he understood that the thing he feared most might be real. He leaned back, hands trembling. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, I replied. You just need to want the truth. From there, everything clarifies on its own. He nodded slowly. For the first time in months, I didn't see evasiveness in my son's eyes, only the quiet acceptance of truth arriving. After he left, I sat alone. I scrolled past the files, then turned off the screen. Outside the window, a waning moon hung over the lake, scattering light across the water. I ran my fingers over the table where the notice had sat that morning and smiled faintly. The question had been planted, and like any seed, truth only needs time to sprout. I closed the journal, blew out the light, and whispered, "Now let's see how long they can hold out before they break the silence themselves." That night a fine, relentless rain came down, like it was washing away the last of the lies. I was about to turn off the light when my phone buzzed an unknown number, no name saved, no profile photo. The first text was just 5 words. "You should see this." Below it were 3 photos sent back to back, each one slicing straight through the shell of quiet Caleb and I had tried to keep. Photo 1, Aubrey and Graham Pierce, yes, clearly him standing under the yellow lights of the parking lot outside the Crescent Inn. They were holding hands, heads tilted close, smiling in a way no co-workers would. Photo 2, Graham's hand on Aubrey's pregnant belly, not a polite touch, but intimate and possessive. The streetlight glinted off that familiar silver watch on his wrist, and Aubrey's face glowed relaxed, bright, not at all like someone afraid of being found out. Photo 3. The 2 of them at the front desk, Graham handing a room key card to the clerk. Aubrey tilted her head, hair loose, a small smile on her lips. Under the photo, the sender added one more line, "He's paying for both her and the baby." I felt my blood go cold, but strangely, I didn't shake. Just absolute stillness. No panic, no anger, only confirmation of what I'd known too well for a long time. I saved the 3 photos to a private folder, locked it with a password, then backed everything up to an external drive. I didn't call Caleb. I knew if I told him now, he'd explode and that would ruin everything. A storm should only break when the person holding the reins is ready. I opened my computer and ran the photos through metadata checks. Each image had geolocation and timestamps. First photo, 11:46 p.m., April 18th. Second photo, 11:50 p.m., same night, same spot. Third photo, 11:58 p.m., Crescent Inn lobby. I opened my log and cross-checked. That exact night, Caleb had reported staying at the office to check the systems. I'd also written, Aubrey left the house at 10:40 p.m., returned at 1 a.m. Everything matched down to the minute. I stared at the screen in silence. The blue light washed over my face, showing every crease at the corners of my eyes, marks of the years, and of the clear-headedness youth rarely has. I picked up my phone, opened the Photos app, and made a slideshow with the 3 pictures in time order. I chose a slow fade transition not for drama, but to give the viewer time to see each detail, the hand, the eyes, the space or lack of it between their bodies. File name, Crescent, photo set. Then I opened voice memos, pulled up the recording from the baby sprinkle, and pinned it to the top. I renamed it Crescent Proof, short, clean, unmistakable. I sat at my desk and opened the brown leather notebook I use for timelines. In careful script, I wrote line by line. April 2nd, neighbor Paula Delaney saw Aubrey with Graham Pierce at the Crescent Hotel. April 4th, April 8th, door camera. Logged a black Lexus in front of the house 3 times. April 12th, baby sprinkle. Graham appeared and handed Aubrey an envelope. April 18th, 11:46 p.m. Photos at the Crescent Inn. Graham's hand on Aubrey's belly. Witness, Paula Delaney. Evidence, photos, video, audio, metadata. I looked up at the final line. I added myself, everything will be presented publicly with a witness, with evidence, and with lawful ownership. That was all it took to frame a confrontation no one could dodge. Around midnight, I called Alan Mercer. His voice was rough and sleepy, but the second I said, "We have photos," he snapped awake. "Even stronger than audio," I said. Metadata matches the hours Caleb reported being away. "Do we have a witness?" Yes, neighbor Paula Delaney. I logged dates and times, and she's willing to testify if needed. Perfect, he said. Then just wait for my signal. When I say stage ready, you present everything to the right people, at the right time, in the right place. Where? I asked. Right in that house, he said, pausing. Nothing beats the truth laid out in front of family. I was quiet a few seconds, then let out a small laugh. Exactly. I want them to hear it in the very house they thought they'd taken. After I hung up, I turned off all the lights except the desk lamp. On the table sat files, a USB drive, printed photos, an external hard drive, everything organized like pieces arranged for the final battle. I looked at them and felt like I was steering a storm from its eye. The window was cracked. The lake air came in cold. I pulled my cardigan tighter, leaned back, and felt a soft tiredness ripple through me, but in my head, everything was crystal clear. It had been a long time since I felt in control of my life. No longer the annoying, outdated, in-the-way mother. No longer a shadow in my own home. Now I was the only one who knew all the pieces and held the key to them all. Before bed, I opened the text thread from the unknown number. No name, no photo, just a short line. He's paying for both her and the baby. I didn't know who sent it, maybe a hotel employee, maybe a bystander who wanted justice, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that someone chose to stand with the truth. I replied with one line, "Thank you." Then I deleted the chat from the phone, but kept everything saved to a second external drive and locked it in the safe with the house papers. I turned off the light but couldn't sleep right away. In the dark, I heard the soft patter of rain on the roof, each drop like a quiet count toward the moment when everything would blow open. I thought back to the first morning Aubrey said, "You should move out," a voice sweet as sugar with a razor underneath. Back then I felt stripped of everything. Space, my son's affection, my dignity. But now, looking back, I understood. Sometimes loss is the purest form of freedom. I lay down and pulled up the covers. In my mind, I saw those 3 photos again under the jaundiced streetlights where 2 people thought no one was watching. They didn't know each picture is now a bullet of truth, and I'm the only one holding the trigger. For the first time in months, I closed my eyes and slept deep. No fear, no anger. Just one thought, light as breath. The storm has reins, and I'm the one holding them. 3 days later, Aubrey announced a cozy dinner to bring the family's spirit back together. She said it breezily, as if there hadn't been legal notices, fights, or clenched teeth threats over text. "Just a few of Caleb's co-workers, Mom," she said, eyes shining innocent. "They want to meet his family, and I think you should be there. You're the soul of this house." I smiled. "Yes, that's right. I'll be there." She didn't know I'd been waiting for this, an audience, bright lights, a witness, and the perfect timing to strip everything bare. Friday night, the house glowed, dinner scents mixing with expensive perfume. I took the seat at the head of the table, the spot Edris used to claim. Aubrey breezed between the kitchen and dining room, smile pasted on. Caleb was quiet, face tight. The meal unfolded in that practiced, fake calm. A couple of Caleb's co-workers, 2 men and a woman, talked shop, threw in a few compliments about the food, and called the house cozy. I caught the sideways looks at Aubrey, a mix of curiosity and discomfort. When dessert came out, I set my spoon down and took out my phone. "Let me share a few photos," I said lightly. Every eye turned to me. I set the phone in the center and swiped. The screen lit up the 3 photos one by one under the warm dining room lights. First photo. Aubrey and Graham holding hands under the hotel's streetlight. Second, Graham's hand on her belly, too intimate to deny. Third, the 2 at the front desk, Graham handing over a key card, smiling. Nobody spoke. The soft clink of flatware on china stopped cold. I didn't look at Aubrey, I looked at Caleb. He froze. His jaw clenched. His eyes locked on the screen. Under the light, his face went pale, like someone had yanked the air from his lungs. "Aubrey," he said quietly, voice snagging. "What is this?" Aubrey blinked fast, mouth opening and closing. It's a misunderstanding," she stammered. "Graham is a coworker. He was just comforting me because I've been under stress." I leaned in and swiped to the next file. From the phone speaker came a clean audio clip, slick as a blade through fabric. "Graham, once the baby's born, he'll handle everything." "Aubrey, I'm afraid your mother will find out." "Graham, she won't suspect a thing. Just keep playing the exhausted wife." I didn't feel anger, only a cold line down my spine. Have you ever heard a sentence that made your heart stop because you knew everything changed in that instant? If you have, share it in the comments. Maybe we'll understand each other better through those cracks. My voice sounded far away, like I was an outsider to my own play. The air in the room thickened. One coworker lowered his head and slid his wineglass aside. The woman pressed her lips together and shook her head. I didn't need to say another word. Aubrey's polite mask was breaking on its own. "Aubrey," Caleb said, firmer now. "Who is he? And the baby?" She shot up, her chair clattering backward. "Who are you listening to? A jealous mother trying to wreck her son's family?" "I'm listening to you," Caleb cut in. "And to what you said to Graham Pierce." Graham's name hit like a knife. I saw Aubrey's lips tremble. She looked around for an ally, but everyone stared at the table. No one defended her. No one spoke. I stood, picked up my phone and slipped it into my pocket. "Dessert was good," I said quietly. "Thank you for inviting me. It helped me see my future daughter-in-law more clearly." That night, after the guests left, the fight exploded in the living room. I heard every word, every breath between curses. "I deserve my own life. You never understood me," Aubrey screamed, voice shredded. "And the baby, Aubrey, is it mine?" Caleb asked, heavy and hoarse. No answer. Just the scrape of a suitcase over wood, the rasp of a zipper, the slam of a door. I went to the window and looked out at the drive. Under the porch light, the black Lexus pulled up. Graham Pierce stepped out, popped the trunk, lifted luggage. A few minutes later, Aubrey appeared in a long coat, never looking back. Graham took her arm and opened the door. They got in, and the Lexus slid into the dark, its taillights dragging a red streak across the wet road. I stood still, not happy, not triumphant. Just the quiet after a storm you knew was coming. When I turned back, Caleb had collapsed onto the sofa. His head was in his hands, eyes red. He looked hollow, like someone had ripped out his heart. I went to the kitchen, made a mug of peppermint tea, and set it in front of him without a word. He looked up, eyes wet. "How long have you known?" "Since you started avoiding my eyes," I said. "And you waited until now to say anything?" "I didn't say anything," I answered. "I let the truth speak." He nodded and dropped his gaze. I sat beside him, without touching his shoulder, without comforting words. Sometimes pain needs to breathe, not be smothered. The clock ticked. Wind nudged the window. In a house that had echoed with arguments, there was finally real quiet. Caleb spoke at last, voice ragged. "I've been blind for too long. You tried to tell me and I wouldn't listen." I shook my head slightly. "No, Caleb. I never tried to tell you. I waited for you to see." He let out a thin, bitter laugh. "Well, I see now. And what will you do with it?" "I don't know," he whispered. "But for the first time, I know you weren't wrong." I nodded. Nothing more needed saying. I poured more tea and nudged the cup toward him. Steam rose, wrapping the warm lamplight in a thin haze between us. We sat there a long time, both quiet. The house was peaceful, the kind of peace only those who've lost something can recognize. When the clock crept toward midnight, I stood and eased the door shut. The soft click of the lock was the sound of an old chapter closing. In the living room, Caleb still sat staring at the steaming tea. He wasn't a man lost in a mirage anymore. In that light, I saw my son hurt, fragile, but real. I walked back and sat beside him. No talk of forgiveness, no lessons. I just kept my hand near his close enough so he knew I was there. In the quiet, with warm tea and the wind at the eaves, the mother-son bond that lies had severed began to tie itself back together by the truth. And that, to me, was the only victory that mattered. The next morning, early sun poured through the living room windows. The light was soft but clear, catching dust motes still hanging, the dust of long silence, of false words, of hidden wounds. I poured myself coffee and stood looking around the house. It was strangely quiet. No staccato heels, no heavy perfume, no lectures about how the baby needs quiet. Just me, Caleb, and the truth. I started the morning by dusting the family photos. The one of the three of us at Lake Michigan when Caleb was 10, I was in a red sweater. Edris had an arm around our boy, and Caleb grinned, holding a fishing pole bigger than he was. I blew the dust from the corners and set it back where it belonged, above the mantel. Right beside it, I rehung Edris's portrait, the one Aubrey had taken down, to brighten the room. I stepped back and looked at my late husband's smile in the wooden frame. Light bounced off the glass with a soft gold. "Good morning, Edris," I said softly. "Everything's going back where it belongs." The next room, the one Aubrey had christened the nursery, was quiet now. Pale pink bits, ribbons, baby coming soon signs still lingered, remnants of a false dream. I took down the crib, mobile plastic stars turning lazily, and placed it in a box. Then I broke down the white crib, wiped each slat clean, and stacked it neatly. In its place, I painted the walls a warm sand, the color Edris once chose for the living room. The faint scent of new paint mixed with dry wood and the morning breeze through the window. I set up a small guest bed, tucked in crisp white sheets, and put a little vase of lavender on the nightstand. The room wasn't a symbol of possession anymore. It was a quiet corner for anyone who came here in good faith. By noon, I boxed up Aubrey's decor: gold-plated frames, glass vases, throw pillows embroidered with "Home Sweet Home," all wrapped, taped, and sealed. I labeled each box by hand. Property of Aubrey Whitfield. Hold for 30 days. No anger, no spite. Just doing exactly what the lawyer advised, reestablishing boundaries. Caleb came in as I sealed the last box. He didn't say anything at first, just watched, then stepped beside me and helped press the tape tight. After that, he grabbed the toolkit and started tightening door hinges, changing bulbs, and fixing the loose stair rail that had been wobbling for months. I watched without stepping in. The son I thought I'd lost to sweet, poisonous words was coming back, not with promises or tears, but with small, steady actions. When Caleb climbed the ladder to change the bulb, the new light spilled over the dining table. I caught a fleeting smile in his eyes, tired but calm. "Mom," he said, barely above a breath, "the house looks so much brighter." I answered, "Because the darkness is gone, son." That afternoon, we sat in the living room and went over the papers Mercer had sent. I said, "No need to contact Aubrey anymore. Let the lawyers handle it. We'll wait out the 30 days. Caleb nodded. "I don't want to talk to her. At least now I know who's actually on my side." We didn't need more words. Between us was a quiet agreement, something I hadn't felt with my son in years. I cleaned the kitchen at the end of the day. When I opened the cabinet, I found the blue porcelain set, the one Aubrey had temporarily stored in the basement. I washed each piece, dried them, and put them back in their place in straight rows. When my hands touched the cool porcelain, I realized this house was never lost, only covered by the dust of lies. I turned on the oven and baked waffles. The cinnamon drifted through the kitchen, sweet and full of memory. It had been years since that smell filled the house. Back then, whenever I baked, Edris would open the window to let the breeze in and say, "A house is truly alive when it Smells like something made with love. I did the same, threw open the window facing the lake. The morning air rushed in, carrying clean mist and the ripple of small waves. Sunlight bounced off the water, throwing bright specks across the wall. It felt like a simple house blessing, no priest, no ritual, just wind, light, and a heart that had stopped being afraid. Caleb stood in the doorway, a bit of paint still on his hands. He said quietly, "Mom, the house looks like it used to." I wiped my hands on my apron and smiled. "No, son. The house looks the way it's supposed to." He nodded and sat down, eyes resting on the candle I'd just lit on the dining table. I knew we were both thinking of Edris, the man who laid each brick of this house. The one who used to say, "Every storm just washes the porch clean." Late that night, I sat by the window and wrote a handwritten letter to Paula Delaney. "Dear Paula, I want to thank you not just for what you told me that day, but for your straightforwardness. You have no idea how much it helped me. In life, some people pass by for only a moment, but leave a streak of light like a lamp in the night. I hope one day you'll come over for tea and hear the end of this story when everything is finally quiet. With sincere gratitude, Nora Whitfield." I folded the letter, put on a stamp, and set it neatly on the table by the window. When night fell, I sat again in the living room. A small lamp cast warm light that reflected off the family frames. Outside, the lake was glass still. Inside, I felt no more turmoil, just a deep peace, the kind that comes after a big storm, when you know what remains is worth keeping. I said softly, not sure if it was to Edris or to myself. "The house has been returned to its rightful person, and so has my heart." One quiet morning, with golden sun coming through the window, I stood in the living room with a cup of tea, looking around the home that had just gotten its soul back. Everything was clean, warm, and tidy, but inside me there was still a quiet, empty space. The long sofa still had room to spare. The guest bed in the freshly painted room still smelled of new wood. I asked myself, what am I keeping that room empty for? Edris is gone, Caleb is mending day by day, and I, a 68-year-old woman who fought through deceit, now found my house too quiet. That afternoon, while clearing the table, I saw a small notice in the local paper. Lakewood Women's Center calls for temporary housing for domestic violence survivors. The center is over capacity and needs community shelter. I sat still for a moment. Then I picked up the phone and dialed. "Lakewood Women's Center. How can I help?" A middle-aged woman's voice, gentle but tired. "This is Nora Whitfield," I said. "I don't know how much this helps, but I have a spare room. I'd like to offer it for free the first month, if someone needs a safe place." Silence for a few seconds, then a soft exhale. "Mrs. Nora, you just saved someone you haven't met yet." 3 days later, Janelle arrived. She was 42, black hair tousled, dark circles under her eyes, clutching a small plastic bag like someone might tear it away. She didn't say much, just a slight nod when I opened the door. I didn't ask questions. I simply showed her around: kitchen, bathroom, washer, then the spare room with fresh sheets and a lavender vase. "Here's the key," I said. "If you need anything, knock. If not, keep the kind of quiet you want." She nodded, clutching the bag to her chest. That first night, I heard water in the sink, a spoon touching a mug. Around midnight, the kettle whistled softly in the kitchen. I stepped out and found Janelle standing there, eyes startled like a child caught doing something wrong. "Sorry," she whispered. "I just wanted some tea." I smiled and pulled out a chair. "It's okay. Here, you don't have to apologize for existing." She looked at me a long time, then nodded with tears in her eyes. That night the house found its voice again, small but real. 3 weeks passed. One morning I woke to find Janelle's room empty. The closet, neat, bed made, and a folded note on the table. "Mrs. Nora, I've left not because I'm scared, but because I finally can." Thank you for the room, for the quiet, and for not asking questions. You gave me back air. Janelle. I held the note and read it over and over. You gave me back air, made my heart tremble. Sometimes what people need isn't shelter, it's a corner where no one judges. I sat on the bed and took a long breath. The room wasn't empty anymore, it had just been filled with meaning. 2 weeks later, the center called back. Mrs. Nora, there's a young woman and her 2-year-old. No one will take them because the child's so young. Are you sure? I'm sure, I said. Bring them. That afternoon, Mariah arrived, 23, thin, with a close-cropped haircut, carrying little Ollie with big dark eyes. When they stepped inside, Mariah froze, like she was afraid to touch anything. I just smiled, crouched to Ollie's eye level. Hi, Ollie, do you like toy cars or blocks? He pressed his lips together, then whispered, Cars. I nodded. Cars are in that corner, next to the vase. I'd already set out a basket of toys, a few cloth books, a small teddy bear, and a jar of daisies on the table. Mariah looked at me, her lips trembling. You really prepared this for us? I didn't prepare it for anyone, I said. I prepared it for people who need a place to breathe. 3 days later, the house began to change. Mornings came with small footsteps down the hall and little giggles from the living room. Afternoons smelled like roasted chicken and stewed vegetables. At night, instead of total silence, I heard a soft lullaby from the next room, Mariah's voice gentle as wind at the window. I didn't feel invaded. On the contrary, the house, the same house once taken over by lies and schemes, was full of real life now. Caleb came home for the weekend, stood in the kitchen, and smiled. Mom, are you fostering kids? I said, No, I'm just lending out warmth, the thing I used to be afraid of losing. He looked around and said, Our house sounds different. It does. I smiled. Now it knows how to breathe. At the end of the month, I made a small wooden sign and painted the letters by hand. Whitfield Room, 30-day bridge. I hung it by the front door, right under the trellis. No bright signage, no loud announcement, just a quiet message. If you need a temporary shelter, there's a room here, and someone who won't ask too many questions. That afternoon, I sat on the porch steps and watched the sunlight stretch across the lake. Lavender drifted on the breeze. Inside, Ollie laughed out loud after spilling flour, and Mariah rushed to wipe the floor, still smiling. My chest warmed in a way I can't explain. I understood that healing isn't erasing the past. Healing is being able to open the door and let others in, to let them stay in the place where you once broke without fearing it'll be taken again. My Lakewood house had been through darkness, betrayal, and the most delicate kind of deceit. But now, it could hold others without losing itself. I looked at Edris's photo and said softly, See, we made this old house into something bigger than revenge. Then I smiled and listened to the little tink of wind on the wooden sign. To me, that sound was a confirmation. I'm not a victim anymore. I'm the one who opens the door. On the morning of the 30th day, I woke before the sun. Dawn spread honey-colored light across the lake. On the table lay an email from Attorney Mercer, short and final. Mrs. Whitfield, the 30-day period has ended. No claims, no response from Aubrey or her representative. The file is officially closed. I read each word slowly to be sure I hadn't misread. A long chapter full of smoke, tears, and tug-of-war had truly ended. No door knock, no courtroom, no last showdown. Aubrey's silence was the clearest confirmation. She knew she'd lost and had nowhere to return to. I breathed deep, sipped my coffee, and felt my heart steady for the first time in months. At noon, Caleb came home. He stood at the door with an envelope, his eyes relieved but tinged with shame. Mercer sent a copy to me too, he said. It's really over, Mom. I nodded. The legal part is over, but what about your part? Caleb looked up. In his eyes there was no defensiveness, no suspicion, only genuine remorse. He walked closer and set the envelope on the table. I'm sorry, Mom, for letting someone make me doubt you, for staying quiet when you needed me most. I placed a hand on his shoulder. You don't need to apologize for being fooled. Everyone misses the light sometimes until the darkness passes. He nodded slightly and took a breath. I've started seeing a therapist, Mom, not just to forget, but to learn not to repeat things. I want you to trust me again. No promises needed, I smiled. Just live decently. That's enough. 2 days later, the local paper buzzed with news. Graham Pierce, the man in the dark suit with steel-cold eyes, was under investigation for financial fraud and investment scams. Accounts frozen, company charged. The article didn't mention Aubrey, only a vague note. A young woman previously seen with Pierce in Lakewood is currently unaccounted for. I folded the paper. Not happy, not bitter. Just the sense of a circle closing. Maybe somewhere Aubrey chose to fall into the hole she dug herself. That afternoon I went down to the storage room. The boxes labeled "Property of Aubrey Whitfield" sat in the corner, dusty. I took a marker, crossed out her name, and added, "Unclaimed items." I locked the storage door, slid in a new lock, and listened to the clean click, the crisp sound of a sealed past. The next month, my Lakewood house ran a rotation for temporary guests. I set clear rules. Each person could stay up to 30 days, respect the shared spaces, and, if possible, contribute one weekend dinner for everyone to share. I called it the Dinner Fund. One Friday night, there were 5 of us around the table, me, Caleb, Janelle back for a visit, Mariah and little Ollie, and a new young woman named Trina just out of the center. The room smelled like roast chicken and garlic bread, and soft laughter rolled around the dining room. When Caleb raised his glass, I caught his gaze, the look of a man who'd been lost and was finding his way back to a real family. He said, "Mom, you turned this house into something I didn't expect, not just a home, but a place that saves people." I said, "Not saving people, son. I'm just opening the door so they can save themselves." That night, I sat alone in the living room. On the wall, the family photo hung straight, and the lamplight on Edris's face made it seem like he was smiling. Below it was a new lock, small, but more meaningful than any deed. I took back this house, but not with hatred. I took it back with light, patience, and faith that truth finds its way home. I opened my journal and wrote the final line of this journey. I wasn't driven out of my house. I drove the darkness out of mine. I closed the book and listened to the soft whisper of pages settling like agreement. That night, I sat on the porch looking at the lake. The breeze was cool, the water rippled, moonlight shimmered across the surface. Off in the distance, my house, the one that had been taken, lied about, and strangled, now glowed a steady, gentle gold, not blinding but warm and enduring. Caleb stepped out and draped a sweater over my shoulders. "Mom, I think people need to hear this story," he said. I smiled. "Those who need it will hear it, son. And those who aren't ready one day, when they're brave enough to open a door, they'll understand." When the wind moved through the willows, I closed my eyes and listened to the quiet sounds around me. No more strange footsteps, no more manipulative voices, no more fear of being pushed out of my own life, only the light of a real home where people are allowed to breathe and to begin again. I lifted my head to the Lakewood sky, where the stars blinked patiently, reminding me that darkness never wins forever. I smiled a calm smile, light as the lake breeze. Thank you for walking with me to the last page of this story. If you've been through something like this, if your home ever had corners you were afraid to enter because someone made you feel that way, tell me in the comments. I read every line and am grateful for every share, because each true story is a small lamp in the night. Where are you from? Lakewood, Houston, Toronto, or across the ocean? Let me know so this little channel home can feel a bit closer to you. And if this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so every time I open the door to tell more, you'll always have a seat in the front row. Thank you for helping keep the light in this house from ever going out.